I think maybe we'll get started and let anyone else who wants to join us, join us. Good morning, early birds, even before the keynote. My name is Jody Lehr Waite, and I'm an independent consultant, formerly with Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York, recently retired and now doing independent international higher education consulting, and fortunate enough to be here with Univassist at the conference today. And joining me at this session, Adam Bixler from Miami University of Ohio and Jim McLaughlin from Drexel University. It was an easy sway to have them join me on the panel because STEM and STEAM are important concepts for both of their schools, both of their campuses. So our discussion this morning is from STEM to STEAM and everything in between. And so if this is what you intend to be here to be listening to and participating in, terrific. If you wandered in not knowing what it was all about, hopefully you'll stay and engage with us and learn a little bit more about what we have to offer. What we hope to be doing today is talking primarily to the high school counselors, although, are there any college reps in the audience? Okay, you can stay, absolutely, and through what Adam and Jim, or Aaron rather, and Jim have to say, maybe help you shore up some of your own knowledge on within your offices about what you're doing and how you're recruiting students at the high school level here in India. From an objective standpoint, we hope to be providing you with an understanding of what STEM means, and I think we all know what STEM means, to the difference between STEM and then STEAM, and reviewing some of those traditional majors that fall into either category. Come on in and join us. And then some of the non-traditional university majors, and that's where Aaron and Jim will really focus on what their universities offer. And we'll hope to get lots of you engaged in the discussion as well about what your universities do to identify the traditional, the non-traditional. Then talk a little bit about what's driving the students, the left brain, the right brain, how those different sides of the brain collide and can move a student into a STEM discipline or a STEAM discipline. Come on in. We just got started. That's okay. Please join us. And then again, for Aaron and Jim, their expertise to really highlight how the universities make the connection, connect the dots between the STEM interested student, the STEAM interested student, and where that collision of the left and the right brain may occur, and really propelling those students into career success. So we all know STEM, right? If you've been living under a rock for a number of years, you might not know, but hopefully everybody in the room knows science, technology, engineering, and math versus STEAM. So what is the A for STEAM representing? Shout it out. Who can tell me what the A of STEAM is? Arts, exactly. Okay, what a smart group. It's not too early in the morning for you. You've all had your coffee. And arts isn't just painting and drawing. It's a lot more than that. And so we're going to explore all that encompasses the arts. The universities that are in the room, how many of you are STEM alone without the arts component? Anyone? Raise your hand. Okay, so the universities in the room, how many of you then have the STEM with that arts component in some way? Good. And point of housekeeping, let's all put our phones on vibrate, please. Thanks. So, arts, it's not just painting and drawing. It is, but it's not just. It involves the performing arts just as much as the visual arts, and the theater, music, writing, the production, the performance. But from an artistic standpoint, from a visual artistic standpoint, it's the art education, animation. Think about the computer science interested student who loves to draw. Animation is computer science and graphic design and regular creative design, right? So you've got that student who is both left and right brain, who has an opportunity to pursue a major that takes him or her into an exciting career that is both left and right brained. It's the STEAM that is really driving that student. Film, how much of film today is digital production? Significant portion, right? Any film you see that has a special effect, you know is a digital film spliced into perhaps traditional film. Coming from Rochester, New York, the home of Kodak, Kodak has changed dramatically as a company over years, but a major product at Kodak today is still motion picture film. Motion picture film is still the bread and butter of Hollywood and Bollywood, but special effects are digitally represented and spliced into motion picture film. So again, anyone who has that interest, that's that left and right brain working together again. The interior designs, commercial designs, industrial designs, couple of others, the medical illustration over on right side. Medical illustration. How many of you may have the biology student, the high school student who excels in biology, wants to go into medicine, but maybe doesn't excel in chemistry, in mathematics, but excels in art and design? Medical illustration is a phenomenal field to pursue. Again, left and right brain, there probably isn't more specific or identifiable connection there between that left and right brain for a student who has those two strengths. And allow them to follow those passions. If a student loves art and design and loves biology, anatomy, any of those sciences which draw upon the human body, medical illustration is a tremendous fun way to tap into those two passions. Game design and development, one of the strongest careers out there right now. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the computer science and the animation, that's all about game design and development. But what's interesting is you can, as high school counselors now, you can have your students look at a school, at a university, which has a focus in the computer side of game design and development. So it's computer science with animation and art and design as value added, or flip the coin, and you can have them looking at a university which is graphic design animation oriented with the computer science as the value added. So be aware of your students' interest level and skill level, and which is the passion that is driving them more. Is it the computer science, the left brain? Is it the graphic design, the right brain? And how are they going to merge or transition from a purely STEM focus into that STEAM focus? Another one I want to talk about, the writing, creative and technical writing. How many of you high school counselors have students who are strong creative writers, who maybe want to go into writing or literature or something involving poetry and prose? And those are wonderful fields to pursue. But if someone is also interested in some of the sciences, in mathematics, there are some incredible opportunities at universities in the United States specifically, and I'm sure worldwide, but specifically in the United States, which offer technical writing, technical and professional writing as a major. From Rochester Institute of Technology, for instance, I actually have a student friend who graduated from RIT with a Bachelor of Science in Technical Professional Writing, who went on to earn his MBA, also from RIT, who now is working in the auto industry as a technical writer and has an extraordinary career. He loved writing. That was his passion. So how do you take that passion and drive it, no pun intended, for the auto industry, drive it into a career interest, balancing the STEM and the STEAM? And so that's a great way to think about, again, working with your students' real, true underlying passions, identifying those passions, and tapping into the STEAM aspect, not just sticking with the STEM aspect. And then a couple of others, probably the last one on the right-hand column, the sound and music engineering. Lot of musicians, there's a huge correlation between mathematics and music. For those of you who have done any study in the brain and its comprehension of mathematics and its comprehension of music, there's probably no more exciting career direction for someone who loves the mathematics and the music than sound or music engineering. You know, go figure, when 40 years ago when I was in high school, that didn't even occur, it wasn't even on the roadmap. 20 years ago, wasn't even on the roadmap. Today, it's a very, very popular major for someone to pursue who has those two passions. And this is just a very random cross-section of some of those traditional areas that you might want to engage your students, to have them thinking about. What you also need to take into consideration, and obviously you know your students better than I do, better than Jim, better than Aaron do, but you need to understand the emphasis culturally on careers. And we all know in India, medicine, engineering are sort of the tails wagging the dog, right? But not everyone can be a doctor, not everyone can be an engineer, and not everyone should be. And that's your role as the counselor in the office, guiding the student, tapping into those interests, working with them on making those true assessments, and then with those real true assessments, deciding, okay, given that, and what your passion is, and what these assessments are telling us about what you want to be doing, how do you balance that with the parental role of the career influencer? God bless you. It's not an easy job. I recognize that, we recognize that, and we've all been in the trenches long enough to know that can at times be an uphill battle, but it's becoming more and more we're finding more and more part of the parental psyche here to understand that career success is more and more dependent upon that personal intrinsic success and satisfaction, and allowing the students to pursue what they genuinely want to pursue, and not just I'm an engineer, so you'll be an engineer, or your grandfather and your grandmother were doctors, so you'll be a doctor too. It's allowing for some flexibility, happening slowly, but allowing for some flexibility. The United States is famous for its academic and career assessment tools, and I think those are becoming more popular in the Indian schools, the counseling staffs, as counseling is becoming more integrated into Indian schools. Counselors are using more and more of the true assessments, academic assessment, as well as career assessment. And there's some wonderful value there. There's also some limitations because they may not be assessing students on some of those out-of-the-box kinds of career opportunities because they were created under a more traditional umbrella, so they're focused in more traditional manners. Think out of the box and use those assessments as a guideline, but not the rule. And then again, balancing interests with abilities and aspirations. If I had a rupee for every time a student or a parent asked me, so what job pays the most in the United States? Because that's what I want to pursue, or that's what I want my son or my daughter to pursue. I could have retired years before I did. But my response to that question was always, I know the answer, but I'm not going to tell you. You need to let your student follow his passion, follow her passion. And there's that world of STEM, and today STEM is such a driver to the CPT and the OPT opportunities, and ultimately the H-1B visas that so many Indian students and the parents want. But then that STEAM category is also there, and there's a world of those opportunities within STEAM that tap off of the STEM and allow the students to really pursue exactly what they may want. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Aaron, and he's going to elaborate more on the Miami University of Ohio model and how they internalize all of this on the campus for the students there. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Aaron Bixler. I work at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Just a little background. Miami's a public university with about 18,000 students. We offer over 100 majors, so a lot of opportunities for students there. We're in a small town in Ohio, so it's a very much a college town type of setting. I've been at Miami for 13 years now, so I've worked with a lot of students over the years. I've worked with international students coming to Miami that whole time. What you'll see is many of you, I'm sure, have these conversations all of the time. I've just finishing up 2 weeks of traveling through India, so I've had quite a few of these in the past 2 weeks when I'm talking to students and their parents. And these are the questions that we get, right? It's like, what kind of engineering programs do you have? Or in looking into that, it's often the very traditional ones that the students are looking for. Do you have mechanical engineering or civil engineering, or the very those careers that are kind of ingrained in the students and their parents as good, solid careers. Same goes for computer science. Do you have computer science? Do you teach computer engineering or software engineering? We know that those are solid programs that lead to great careers. So we get a lot of questions about those. Jody touched on the importance of going into the medical field here. So we get a lot of questions about the biosciences. Do you have bioscience? Do you teach pre-med, because we're looking for that very kind of traditional medical doctor track. A few of the less common, but also kind of traditional STEM careers that I'm asked about a lot are things like statistics, mathematics and statistics. Can I go into statistics? What kind of jobs can I get with that? It's a little bit different than the traditional, but still kind of falls in that normal kind of STEM framework that we see quite a bit. Same goes for environmental science. That's been a growing one, but it's very much students looking for a very much a science-based program. But you can also, you can touch on these and the sciences, but go into that arts component and really expand your horizons. I'm going to talk next a little bit about how that works at our school and how we're able to combine some of these traditional careers or traditional subjects with some newer majors and what that can lead to for students. And I think that's really an exciting conversation to have with students. And it's one thing I really enjoy when I kind of get past that first layer of, you want to be a mechanical engineer. Well, why? What do you want to do with that? And then that really can lead to, some really exciting opportunities for students and some things they may have not thought about before. So first, these are some of the arts majors that can lead to some great careers that we have, and that I like to see students have interest in these. The big one is that top one that really is, and Jody touched on it already, for that student who wants to get into virtual reality, artificial reality, game design. I don't know how many times I've been asked about that in the past 2 weeks. But they're not necessarily sure. They don't want to be engineers or computer programmers. Well, with a major like interactive media studies or similar major at another institution, that really gives them the arts component, the design component of that, and allows them to work in new media. Of course, knowledge of computers is an absolute necessity for that, but you don't have to be a computer programmer to go into that field. So that's an option that I like to point out to students who they want to go into game design, they want to design websites, but they don't want to get into that kind of really technical aspect. There are options for students like that, where the computer science part is an add-on to the design. Similarly, for things like arts management and theater, we have a lot of students who they feel as if they have to go into business or another field, but they love the arts. And these are majors where it allows them to get careers that pay, but also to follow things that they love. Things like arts management, working with the business side of arts or theater, or combining technical skills of construction to do set design and be a theater major and work on that end of things. There's a lot of things you can do in the arts without necessarily being an artist. And of course, I think a more evident one, I think, are things like architecture and interior design. We have a lot of students who are quite creative. They want to build things, but they don't necessarily want to be construction engineers. Well, architecture you have to have that STEM background for sure to build things that are going to be sustainable. But the architecture and interior design options are going to allow students to be a lot more creative, allow them to use that creativity that they may not be able to find in that traditional engineering major. Another one I like to point out to students a lot is journalism. A lot of times students have an interest in the arts, in writing, and they also have an interest in things like bioscience. At our institution, a lot of others, to be a journalism major, you also have to major in another field of study. So it really allows them to combine things like bioscience or engineering with writing, so they can be a journalist for the science, an environmental journalist. A lot of options there for students who aren't quite sure they want to go 100% into a STEM field, but they know they want to be connected to it somehow. Finally, I just want to throw out some other under-considered majors at our institution that I like to point students toward when they're kind of in that in-between mode. Students who I have a lot of students who come to me, they love athletics. They want to stay involved in athletics, but they know that probably they're not going to be a professional athlete. So, why not get into the business of athletics? It's a huge, huge business around the world, and that's a great opportunity for students to combine interests. Analytics is another one of those co-majors where students can combine an interest, could be the biosciences, could be humanities with data analysis. Even at our institution, in an admission office at a U.S. university, we have 3 data analysts that work at our school, just in that one department. So you can analyze data for all types of organizations. I touched on it a little bit with the environment too. Environmental studies or sustainability would be students who they really are excited about the environment, but they don't like that hard science component of it. So why not get into the environmental policy side of things? You have that science, that STEM background as kind of a background knowledge, but you can focus on the public policy side of the environment. And then finally, the last two, the diplomacy, the comparative politics, things like that, I think are really under-considered majors too for students who would like to work in government or work in business or anything that's going to really require a wide wide background knowledge and allow you a lot of opportunities, either in international positions with government or international business. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jim, and he can talk a little bit about what they're doing over at Drexel.
Thanks, Aaron. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I thought this was a pretty fitting way to begin the conference. My background, a little bit about me. I'm the Associate Director of Freshman Admissions at Drexel University in Philadelphia. My background, my own educational experience is actually in a traditional liberal arts environment, both for undergraduate and graduate study personally. At St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, and then I moved on and actually began my career in international education at a small private liberal arts college called Chestnut Hill College, about 2,600 total students in Northwest Philadelphia. Moving to Drexel from that environment essentially was the polar opposite. Drexel, we have about 26,000 students. I think most commonly known for programs offered in STEM. And when I arrived here to Mumbai Sunday night and began doing some private meetings and meetings with counselors and students, the questions immediately started coming about outcomes. And as Jody started out, pointing out, where should we kind of looking at asking the question of where do we begin? Where do our students begin by looking at actually where they end? And there's a bit of an interesting kind of philosophical difference between that approach and the approach that I took in my own path, and actually starting with an interest and a passion that I had in history and sort of worrying about the career later. Now, as we were talking over breakfast, my family was supportive of that. And I think even though in the last decade especially, more and more American families are thinking in that practical setting earlier in the process than they are, I was pleased to hear some of the questions from counselors Monday and Tuesday in my own meetings asking about non-STEM and some sort of STEAM-related areas. So I thought I would begin by providing some statistics, and I know that's a little bit small, but what I wanted to point out here, and what this essentially is showing is this the laser pointer? Okay, great. This is really a listing of all of the academic areas of study at Drexel for majors declared both at the undergraduate and graduate levels. And what I really want to point out here, and this is broken down by academic units. What I want to point out here is that even though Drexel is most commonly associated with engineering, computer science, some of the more STEM-related traditional STEM fields, if you're looking at the percentage of students that are enrolled in our College of Arts and Sciences and the Westfall College of Media, Art, and Design, it's a pretty significant percentage. And what you're looking at is that you're looking at about 18-19% of our population enrolled in some of those what we might call STEAM or more traditional arts or liberal arts areas, as opposed to the traditional STEM fields. So that was an interesting fact that I wanted to point out, and for those visual learners, you can see some of that represented here. In the College of Arts and Sciences and the Westfall College of Media, Art, and Design, some of those things that you will see, interactive digital media, game design and production, that are really combining sort of the left and the right brain, as Jody is kind of introduced us here. It is important to keep in mind, and from my own experience, this was something that really blew me away when I joined the team at Drexel, was that our engineering students, for example, are amazingly creative. Amazingly creative. I think we tend to put some of these students in a box, whereas that's not really a fair approach to take. They're involved in traditional arts and theater programs, whether this is an academic setting or more co-curricular activity where they're enhancing and broadening their own experiences. But so many of our international students are taking double majors or majoring and minoring. Of course, this is something that you want to keep in mind when you're advising your students, and obviously we know you're doing that. So within the College of Arts and Sciences, to give you a little bit of additional background and kind of base this in statistics, this is how the portions are sort of breaking down within the College of Arts and Sciences, all right? So you're seeing a program like psychology, that more than 15% of our students in the College of Arts and Sciences have chosen that particular option. International area studies, similar to what you might think of as a global studies or international relations with language component. So there's a real diversity in the academic area of studies in communication and journalism, public relations, professional writing. Looking over at the Westphal College of Media, Art, and Design, you'll see some of the programs break down like this. So programs such as animation and visual effects, music industry. So at Drexel, we don't focus as much on the performance aspect as we do on the production and business side of things, but this is a great way for students to combine. I was talking with students at several high schools the last couple of days. A lot of them are, of course, they've grown up in a YouTube world. And this is something that's becoming so important and integrated in not just social environments, but also professional environments. So these are real opportunities for students to develop these. Now, inevitably, that question of passion has to kind of evolve into, okay, outcomes. So what? We have an interest in history, or we have an interest in interactive digital media. What does that mean from a practical standpoint? And I think that's where the discussion gets really interesting here in India, because it's the investment of financial resources, time, sacrifices that families are making to send their children abroad. We as American university representatives have to recognize the importance of that sacrifice and then look at what the next step in preparing our students for lucrative and successful careers, but also ones that will be fulfilling. And I think that's where, as advisors, when I get the chance to really sit down and talk with students, I talk just as much about the outcomes as I do about that fulfillment piece. You'd be making $90,000 US right out of college, but if it's in a career that is not fulfilling to you, how long will it last? And what's that going to do for your level of satisfaction, your quality of life? So in my own advising approach, I think it's really a balance between those pieces. But at Drexel, I think we're fortunate because we do put a lot of focus on the preparation and planning phases. And the Drexel CoOp is really how we do that. And I think, I don't want to sit up here and sort of filibuster about Drexel, but I know that so many of my colleagues at other American universities are putting more and more resources and focus on this career development connection to experiential education. But really, that is the hallmark of what we do at Drexel. We are fortunate to have had, we're coming up on 100 years of our co-op program that was founded back in 1919. So we have a vast professional network where more than 91% of our students are graduating from Drexel with at least 6 months of full-time professional work experience. So it's great to have an interest in entertainment and arts management or communication, journalism, professional writing, but how do you then translate that to a career? So the pictures that you see on the left, that's Rachel there on her co-op at Marvel Comics as an animation and digital effects major. So she had the opportunity to go and work for a company that really is introducing her and working on projects in her field. That's the philosophy and approach that we're taking, and I know that's true for many of our peer institutions as well, Urban Outfitters and PricewaterhouseCoopers, so that our students are actually getting that approach and getting that real-world experience that they need. And I think, at least from our standpoint, one of the things that we're most proud of is that, and this percentage at the bottom, 46, is actually, our new data shows that it's upwards of 50%. So our sort of 1 year out survey of, hey, what are you doing? Are you employed? Are you in graduate studies? Are you traveling the world? What is it that you're doing now that you've invested in this great degree at Drexel? Half of the students who are working full-time have been offered a full-time position with one of their co-op employers. So what we're finding is that the earlier we can introduce our students to the professional environments and getting them with, yes, of course, we love to talk about our affiliations with the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, but of our 1,700 company partners, so many of them are NGOs, government agencies, small nonprofits, startup companies. The fact that our students can do multiple co-op experiences will allow them to be in an environment that says, okay, go work for a Fortune 500 company for 6 months. And then after that, for your next co-op, go work for a small startup. See what the management style is like there. Go work for an NGO after that. So when we're advising our students, they say, well, what should I do? Should I stick with the same company? Should I rotate? My advice is always to change it up, because this is one of the few times in their lives and careers that it will be appropriate for them to take a position and then 6 months later say, okay, see you, I'm done, I'm moving on to the next thing. So that it is a safe environment, yet a challenging environment for them to test drive their careers. What we also see is that when students come back from their experiential educations, oftentimes it's informing them that they need to make a mid-course correction. They need to adjust, and maybe they're going from mechanical engineering to chemical engineering, or maybe they're going from marketing to finance, or maybe they're going from construction management to civil engineering. It's more rare that we would see someone go from a biomed to dance or something like that. It's a little bit more balanced in that way. But for us, it is really about that experiential education and combining the theory and practice. And I know so many of our Indian students are looking for that combination of theory and practice, because it is very different here in the university system and what they've sort of been accustomed to expecting out of that academic environment. And I think our students are really enjoying that. So I think as far as it relates to some of the career opportunities, and while many of our co-op positions are paid, that's not the basis for the experiential education. It's really an opportunity for them to explore and to build their professional network. That's a huge, huge, huge component. Jody sort of directed, mentioned CPT and OPT and how STEM, the extension, is kind of driving a lot of this conversation as it relates to selecting careers and selecting majors. That's something that we all in the university side of things in the United States are operating under the same principles, whether you're coming from Harvard or Drexel, or Miami or RIT, we're all operating under the same sort of regulatory principles and limitations and benefits. So some of the counselors were saying, well, they were really probing to say which companies are hiring non-STEM students, not just on OPT, but H-1B and going beyond that sort of that sort of realm. And I don't have statistical data on those. That's a tough question to answer. But the conversation sort of went full circle to go back to that sort of philosophical approach of advising to include not only those sort of practical outcomes that really are crucial when students are choosing majors, but also talking about fulfillment and satisfaction and quality of life. I think that's where representatives from the United States and India can really come together and learn from each other about what is so important to Indian families and Indian students, and sort of the differences, but how we can learn from the value systems that we espouse. I know we want to leave, some time for, question and answer and things of that nature, but I want to sort of conclude my initial piece here by talking a little bit more about the outcomes and sharing a couple more statistics with you. So one of the things that I started to do a little bit of digging for some of our outcome surveys and year-end surveys to say, hey, what are you doing now that you've graduated? So in taking a look, and a couple of the big categories that we'll look at, of course, are those who are employed, full-time and part-time, and then those who are enrolled in graduate study or higher studies. And what I did was look at our College of Engineering versus those in the Westfall College of Media, Art, and Design, and then those in the College of Arts and Sciences. And what we found is probably not a huge surprise, but there are some interesting tidbits in here. And this is 2014 data. We're kind of working to update some of this as we go. But what we found is that what we call the CoAS students, the College of Art and Science students, were much more likely to be immediately enrolled in graduate studies. About 32% of students within that 9 months after undergraduate enrollment were were likely to be enrolled in graduate study, whereas for our engineers, it was only 6%. Okay, that's not to say that they won't move on and pursue advanced degrees, and we know there is a bit of a difference in terms of the expectation for an engineering professional in advanced degrees than there is in some of the other fields in the STEAM and non-STEM. So in the College of Arts and Sciences, 60% were employed, as opposed to going directly into graduate study. In Westfall College of Media, Art, and Design, it was 75% employed versus 16% enrolled in higher level studies. And at the College of Engineering, 86% were actually employed, full-time or part-time, in their field right away, and then either delayed their further education or just stuck with that profession. So I'll end with that and some statistics to sort of feed the discussion here. But I am particularly interested in what my colleagues at other American universities are doing to sort of prepare students for STEAM and non-STEM careers, and then from the counselings from the school side, what kind of shifts, if any, that you are seeing towards the STEAM and the non-STEM, and then what are the parents and the students most interested in asking you? So I'll pause there, Jody.
Okay, I'll just advance it. Okay, so I hope we've given you a pretty sound, solid overview of the comparison of the STEM, that traditional STEM we all know about, with the STEAM, which you maybe have known, okay, A equals arts, but what else is there, and how important is it, how meaningful is it, how intrinsically involved in your discussion with your students should it be, based upon, as Aaron and Jim were saying, the students' interests, their aspirations, their goals, and what outcomes may be tied to being able to pursue those STEAM disciplines and everything else in between. So we'll open it up to questions. I'll bring the mic to you. Are there any questions for any of us? Either you're not quite awake, we've lulled you to sleep, or we've answered all your questions. Hopefully the latter, but any questions at all?
I don't have any questions, but I thought it was really interesting what you were talking about. I work at a UK university, which is, I only work at an arts university, so this is really interesting to hear from America what's happening. I think it's really interesting that we talk a lot about cross-discipline and the fact that, you know, arts isn't just very segregated as you've been talking about. We're often talking about the importance of the cross-discipline at school level as well, that these art subjects, when you're combining them with technology, a lot of it is about the sort of personal traits and business traits that you can use across so many different industries, whether it's problem solving, working in a team, how you creatively problem solve. For me, that goes across every single discipline, whether you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or you're going to be an artist or work in design. For me, these are key skills that everybody needs, and I think it's really interesting that you're talking about how those are really integrated and how you start thinking about that earlier. Rather than just thinking about, I want to be an engineer, or people who say to me, I hear a lot from Indian students, I want to go into business management. And I say, that's great, but what particularly interests you? Have you thought about creative arts management? Have you thought about...
What are you going to manage?
So I think it's really interesting when you're looking at that cross-discipline, which I think is really key, and kind of bringing it all together. So it's really interesting.
Good point. And actually, based upon that management detail, I know of several universities where within the college or the school of business, a student who wants to pursue management as a major has to have a double major. It has to be in accounting or finance or MIS or something else, journalism, anything else to be able to balance with that management. So when that student graduates and goes into management, they have a focus area, like an arts management, a museum management, an accounting, finance, whatever it is. So cross-disciplinary, that is definitely the wave of the future. And that's really the sort of the link with the STEM and the STEAM, the cross-disciplinary. Thank you. Great.
While we have the time, I really would like to take the opportunity to pose the question to our school counseling colleagues here. What are you experiencing from parents? I mean, are you seeing trends in these areas, or these ones that can you share some of your experiences and where you're from, what cities, and how we as university professionals can better address the questions of parents and students as well?
Hi, I'm Sangeeta. I'm from a school called Creative in Bangalore. So I think definitely we're seeing a slow transition of parents wanting to really see what their child is interested in. Yes, of course, medicine and engineering still seems to be the first focus point. But I think somehow children today are much more vocal and very verbal about what they want to do. And parents are also, we're seeing a slow transition. As a school, we offer art and design as one of the core curriculum. So we do see children who are very good at sciences, but, you know, as you said, medical illustration would be something that the child would focus on. So definitely we're seeing a transition and much more opportunities. But as a school counselor, the biggest question is 11th and 12th grades. That is your high school, I think. So how do you choose the subjects? For example, the universities that you represent offer many of these categories. But is there a prerequisite? Like at least universities in India, if you want to pursue sciences, then you have to take up sciences as a major in your 11th and 12th. A child cannot switch from sciences, not having a science into a science background. So my question is are there prerequisites for each of these courseworks? What are the subjects to be taken? Because what you're offering is a wide range and something that's very new. So if as a school, if you're able to understand what are the prerequisites, I think that will really go a long way in understanding how to counsel and guide the child. Thank you.
So I think one of the positives is that for students who are considering, and I know it's a kind of a negotiation with families, right? So I was talking with some of our counselors say, well, student wants this, and parents want this, and then it's sort of this debate. That might go all the way up until when students applying. So at least for us, if a student were to follow a traditional science stream, or probably even commerce stream, or if they're IB or they're Cambridge or whatever their curriculum is, if there's a possibility that they might go STEM, And that would, I don't want to use the word appease, but I can't think of anything better right now. The parents, for that matter, they can do that and still certainly be considered for any major in our Media, Art, and Design College, the Westfall College of Media, Art, and Design. And arts and sciences, that's depending on if they're choosing, biology, which is in our arts and sciences, but also then psychology and communications are on the kind of humanities side of things. I think to be safe, they could stick with a more traditional, science or math-based curriculum, and that would give them the most options. Whereas if they're taking, a more humanities-based route, it really would limit them from, in some cases, applying to the more traditional STEM field. So my advice would be to, do their best to kind of balance that, but within that negotiation between the parents and the students and you as counselors, there'll be a little bit of an art in managing that part. So I don't know if Aaron has...
No, I would agree with that. I would say that that's great advice. A strong, kind of broad-based science background is really going to keep the doors open for everything, for prospective business students or students who want to go into the arts or engineering. That's you can't really go wrong with that. I get asked a lot, do I need to have a certain subject? Do I need to have HL math to go into engineering? And actually in the U.S., that's often not the case. It certainly can be helpful, but we have a lot of courses that U.S. universities will offer students if they are a little deficient in math going into engineering. They can make those up once they arrive. It might add an additional course or two to their workload, but those can usually be overcome.
I also want to, with that in mind, some universities, students are applying to the major, not just to the university. They're applying for admission to a major within the university. And in those cases, it may be really critical to have, if a student wants to go into biomedical engineering, he or she has to have biology and chemistry and physics. But if somebody wants to go into electrical engineering, biology doesn't need to be on the radar. It's just chemistry and physics. So, and we all know there's over 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States alone. So the three of us standing up here and giving a blanket response is difficult because a student, as he or she is assessing what he or she wants to pursue, and you're counseling that student to the direction he or she wants to pursue, having an idea what universities offer those programs, and then what are the dots that need to be connected in order to pursue those programs. And it could be a double major, it could be co-curricular, but what does that student have to do? To really answer your question, what are the prerequisites? It's going to be different at every single university. But what's really important is to know, am I applying to a major, or am I applying to the university, a major within the university, that is, or just the university as a whole? And then once I get there, declaring a major. And that's a fundamental difference of many universities that you really need to know about as counselors. Maybe one last question, anyone? I will invite you all at 2 o'clock to the session on 2020 vision that is focused on helping students understand career growth in the United States based upon Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor statistics for growth in careers, a longitudinal study of careers through 2018 and then through 2022. So it's sort of taking this STEM and STEAM discussion and it's putting it into actual career projection terms so that you can take some hard numbers back to your students with some data on where the growth or the decline is or is not occurring within a particular field. So if there aren't any other questions, thank you all for joining us today. We hope we've been able to connect some dots for you to help your students to be more proactive and interactive with them and guide them along the way. So thanks, and we're here for any questions offline. Thank you so much.